So just some background information. I teach high school biology and the majority of my students are ninth graders, so they're around 14 years old. I don't have any IEP students. We are currently fully virtual. We take attendance and students are expected to attend live Zoom sessions daily. I teach in a private school in Kuwait, which means that most students do get stable internet access at home and they have their own devices. So I'm really lucky to not have to deal with any equity issues. And I think that's one of the main reasons that this can work or this model can work with me is because I know that all my students will have access to my videos and will be able to watch videos before coming to class. So definitely the age group is a plus, and the fact that all the students have access to a device and stable internet connection. Now, in terms of the model overview, I usually will assign video as a homework. So I've been trying really hard this year not to give any homework. The videos that I do record, I try to limit them to 15 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes. Sometimes they go up to 20, but I really try to avoid that. So the maximum I will go for is 20 minutes. I understand that students are on screens all day. I don't want them to be spending hours on a screen when they get home. So the reason why I wanted to use this flipped model this year is because I want students to not have to spend so much time doing homework at home, and also to limit the screen time that they might have, so I know that they're simply spending up to 15 or up to 20 minutes max on the homework for my class. The video lessons are recorded on Loom, which has been a lifesaver. And then I upload the videos to YouTube so that they can be available for all my sections, and so that I ensure that they're available hopefully for next year, because I'm planning on doing this next year as well. It's been really successful. I share the videos on a learning management system and we use Google Classroom. As the students watch the video, they are encouraged to take down notes and write down any questions that they might have and bring them with them to the live Zoom session. Live Zoom session is around 40 minutes and class will always begin with an entry ticket, as you will see. Entry tickets count for participation grades, so I don't count them for correctness. And this is because I don't want students to be discouraged to make mistakes. I want them to answer as honestly as possible, and I tell them to use the entry ticket as a form of self-assessment and a form of self-reflection to know if they understood what they needed to from the video. All my entry tickets are aligned with learning targets that are also the same as the learning targets in the lesson video. So I also section the entry tickets, so each few questions will address a certain learning targets. That way students know exactly which learning targets they might have struggled with and they should go back to the video and rewatch or ask questions about. The entry tickets are always shared with students on their on their Gmail, sorry, so they always have a copy of their answers. And I give them around 10 minutes or so to do this. Then I will use the data analysis from the entry ticket in order to drive my live lesson. So I will look at the points and the learning targets that students mostly struggled with, and then I will go back to the lesson. I will go back to the slides that I might have prepared or the resources and reteach that part of the lesson. I will spend more time on specific parts that students are really struggling with. While the parts that most students kind of already understood, I will not spend so much time on. I will always allow students during these live sessions to write down any questions that they might have in the chat box. They could also raise their hand to ask questions. So I'm kind of addressing a lot of things at once here. So this will usually take around 15 to 20 minutes, and then if students don't have any more questions, I will then give them the chance to work on independent practice or a group activity. It really depends on the day and the activity that is at hand. Sometimes I will also create differentiated breakout rooms. So let's say I have specific students where I notice that their entry ticket grades are way too low. I will place those students in a breakout room, and I will, while the class or the half of the class that did well works on an independent practice activity, I will spend time with those students, that smaller group, reteaching and making sure that they, really grasp the learning targets at hand. So this way I am kind of ensuring that students are, by the end of that live session, students are kind of all on the same or at the same place in terms of understanding of the concepts. And by placing students in smaller breakout rooms, I can really focus on students that are still struggling and might need even more help. I always like to begin my classes with a daily agenda. This way students know exactly what we're doing for the day. As you can see, I follow the same type of model. So I will start with the entry ticket, which then is followed by some form of independent practice or group activity for the students. Entry tickets are a timed activity, so I usually like to include a timer on screen for students to see. Entry tickets are not graded for correctness. Students are encouraged to make mistakes, and this gives me a realistic idea about which parts of the lesson I need to focus more on. And I'm going to be using their data that I collect through this Google form submission in order to guide my lesson from now on.
The first question was talking about the type of molecule that water is. And if you remember from the video,
so as you heard, I like to reference back to the video, so students are always encouraged to watch it when I do assign it. And then I will go back and flip to the lesson slides or to the resources that I've provided in order to reteach or kind of re-explain the parts that students seem to be struggling with.
Is the solvent the thing that dissolves the particles? Yes, exactly.
So students are encouraged to write down any questions that they might have or misconceptions in the chat box. And as you can see here, I read one of the students' questions and I was addressing it during the live session. A lot of the times I also write things in the chat box. So let's say students ask me a specific question, I'll kind of write little notes for the students to save or to write down in the chat box. This way I'm doing multiple things and I'm addressing multiple needs. I have the explanation going on, but I'm also writing in the chat box certain definitions or points that students might need to pay extra attention to or take down as notes.
Water is able to dissolve all other polar molecules.
So at this point, once I've addressed all the questions that the students might have, I'm going to be announcing that they're going to be working on the next activity, which will either be an independent work activity where students are working on practice questions. And at that point, I will allow them to turn off their cameras and the session will shift into asynchronous mode. Or it might be a group activity where I place them in breakout rooms and they work on the activity together. I'm going to show you some examples of some activities that I use following the live reteaching or the live session next. So this is an example of an interactive digital notebook that I've created for students, and as you can see, it's designed so that there are parts that they watch at home, which is the video lesson, and then parts that they will do in class, and I've indicated that for them on the notebook itself. So in class, they would work on these practice questions independently. So this is an example of an independent work type activity that I would give to my students, and I usually have this in the form of a digital notebook. This next activity is your choose your own experiment, and here I had students choose one experiment, and for each experiment that they chose, they had to watch a video, which was a lab demo. Students could either work on this alone or in pairs in a breakout room. And so as you can see, I've included the video demo of the experiment, and as they watched the video, they had to fill in a data table, just like they would in a normal lab situation. They also had to do things like identifying variables, writing hypothesis, and finally, they had to fill out one of these claim evidence reasoning graphic organizers. An example of a group activity where students had to create digital anchor charts for one of the properties of water. So a topic that I've taught, we had already discussed in a video and in a live session or reteach session. And they had to work in groups, so small groups of 3 to 4 people, and they created these really cool posters that served as study tools for the rest of the class. So I basically shared all of these posters before a quiz so that essentially students were creating their own study resources.